Now welcome to another lightning response video, where this time we got a question from Art Official Joe who asked, "Hey Thor, while Andor and Skeleton Crew are on opposite ends of the spectrum in most ways, there's one thing both shows get right. Both shows know who the good guys are and who the bad guys are, and they allow that to play out. Andor understands that the rebellion is on the right side, even if they have to do undesirable things. The show knows they are still the good guys and the Empire is evil. Skeleton Crew keeps Jod as the antagonist while keeping the kids and their parents as the heroes. Also, showing the New Republic as the real good guys is something Disney has shied away from. Understanding Star Wars morality really is foundational to everything. What are your thoughts on this?" And I mean, if you listen to what George Lucas said about why he made Star Wars in the first place, well, it was to teach life lessons to kids, to teach them about spirituality while endorsing no particular religion, though yes, certain ones are borrowed more from than others, and that there are things in this world, in this life beyond the self that we need to care about, that there is a greater good out there that we should be willing to make sacrifices for. In other words, yeah, Star Wars at its foundation is all about morality. It's all about right and wrong, selfless versus selfish, and along with that, I think a pretty strong case can be made that Star Wars is the ultimate good versus evil story, or certainly among them, and that one of the main underlying themes always has been, going along with that morality, it always has been and always should be, that there is always hope, that evil should always be rejected outright, that even when things are at their absolute worst or darkest in story, in, say, Revenge of the Sith, which ends with the bad guys literally winning and gaining control of the galaxy, while it still concludes with the twins being hidden away, it still ends with a glimmer of hope. While in Empire Strikes Back, even though virtually everything goes wrong for our heroes, and they certainly lose in the end, you still have Luke rejecting Darth Vader's offer to rule the galaxy with him, to rule as father and son, and instead choosing what for all he knows will be his death when he lets go and just falls. He, in that moment, is the ultimate example of selflessness and sacrifice for a greater good. And the problem with something like the Acolyte is you don't get that underlying theme of hope. You don't get that rejection of evil and a message about the need for sacrifice sometimes. Instead, you get evil embraced, you get selfishness embraced, and you even get evil justified to a degree. The ending is two dark side users essentially just kind of staring off into the sunset together, hand in hand, seeking vengeance for, in their mind, and what is also being sold to the audience in that moment, with such iconic Star Wars imagery as staring off into the sunset. But it feels like the show is saying, by making them look so heroic, that they're justified to seek vengeance because of being wronged by the Jedi. Wronged by what are traditionally known as the good guys of the story, the epitome of good guys, you could argue. Lucas has always said they are the most moral beings in his galaxy. And yet here they're made out to almost be the bad guys of the story. You have Osha, who is upset that Sol went too far in attempting to protect her. And then Kamir, who, well, we don't know exactly what happened to him, only that he was whipped by his Jedi Master at some point. Not to mention we have poor Torben, who felt so guilty, and in the ultimate demonstration of giving up hope, I would say, he takes his own life. That moment right there might just be the very worst one in the history of Star Wars, which is saying something after all Disney has done in the past decade or so now. And then, after all that, we also have a scene of that aforementioned Jedi Master who did the whipping of Kamir, that being Vanestra Rho. Well, she's now lied to the Senate and has started a cover-up, and we see she's going to Yoda, going to what you could argue is the quintessential Jedi, and I think we can assume she's going to tell him the truth about what really happened to Sol, and that he, Yoda, of all characters, is going to go along with it. He is going to be part of the cover-up. A cover-up that even sort of obscures the possible return of the Sith, and that will then play a part in the downfall of the Jedi Order that we see in the prequels. It seems to be implying that the Jedi are just totally at fault for everything, that it wasn't the Sith, it wasn't evil that is to blame, it was simply the failure of the Jedi from start, the failure of good. Again, there's no underlying message of hope in the Acolyte. There is no rejection of evil. It's not good characters being challenged and clinging to hope and rejecting evil, despite what it may cost them to do so. Rather, it is the concept of good itself being challenged and questioned. And though you're certainly free to have enjoyed The Acolyte as some out there did, but for many that doesn't feel like Star Wars. That's not what it should be all about. You look at something like Skeleton Crew and ask, what was it about that show that, those who watched it anyway, seemed to enjoy so much? Why do so many seem to say that's some good Star Wars right there? And honestly, I think it had a lot to do with, well, it's competently written and enjoyable, yes, but maybe it was the straightforward nature and simplicity of it all. That it is, at its core, a simple good versus evil story. It's about learning what is right and what is wrong, and what it means to step up in the moment and be willing to fight for what is right, and fight for others, for your friends and family, and for everybody, at the risk of the self. And no, I'm not saying you can't ever explore the gray areas of morality in Star Wars to at least some degree. Certainly a show like Andor does that, and I agree with the question that in some ways Andor is at the opposite end of the spectrum from something like Skeleton Crew, but not entirely, not in every single way, because the underlying hope is in Andor. It is all about hope in a manner of speaking. It is about rejecting evil at any price, and sometimes that price can be very high. And it doesn't necessarily explore morality in a way that tries to truly muddy the waters about what is good and evil. It doesn't try to make you question if the rebellion are really the good guys or not, and if maybe the Empire isn't so bad after all. Instead, it asks a very important and very difficult question. That being, how far do the good guys potentially have to go here? How far may they have to go in order to stop the Empire, the greatest of all evils? And what do you become when you do that, when you go too far? It's about sacrificing everything to help others. A very Star Wars message, just in a whole different way than has been presented before. And so, no, Star Wars doesn't always have to be so cut and dry when it comes to the battle of good versus evil. There can be complexity and nuance there, and it can be better for it, as Andor shows us, though it can also be simple and be enjoyable, as Skeleton Crew shows us. But I think there, again, should always have to be that underlying theme of hope. There always needs to be a rejection of the dark side and evil. Yes, you can do a show from the Sith perspective. You can even make it where they really and truly feel like they are justified and in the right. They can hate the Jedi, everything they stand for their own reasons, and have been wronged by them from their point of view. In fact, most of the Sith we see in the films from George Lucas himself, they felt like they were in the right or doing the right thing all along until they weren't anymore. But I think you have to be really, really careful about making the Sith out to be genuine heroes of a story, like they actually are justified to be the way they are or to do the things they do, because the good side is inherently flawed and imperfect, and thus there is no point to beholden yourself to the ways of the Jedi or to be good or seeing them as good examples. And yes, individual Jedi can be flawed and make mistakes, of course. Problem with the Acolyte is the Jedi on the whole seem to be portrayed as an incompetent and corrupt organization that will get what they deserve come the prequels. One of the characters, Mother Anastasia, even predicts their fate as if that is some sort of dark side prophecy that is going to come to pass. And I really do think part of the problem here is that some who have done Star Wars, like a Leslie Headland who did The Acolyte, they don't know how to or just don't want to make the good side interesting, or they feel like people would rather watch something like Game of Thrones, where everyone is just a shade of gray. They maybe think things like Skeleton Crew that keep it all really relatively simple are just tired and boring and that the modern audience doesn't want. I think that they think that people will find moral complexity or ambiguity more compelling, that everyone on their side for their own reasons is just more interesting than here are the good guys and here are the bad guys, let's see if the good guys can win. I also fear many of them really do think that good is just a point of view, and may even cite how that was indeed said in Star Wars, forgetting that it was said by Palpatine, by the most evil man in the galaxy, and he said it in an attempt to corrupt Anakin, to confuse him about what is good and evil, the same way something like The Acolyte tries to confuse the audience watching it about what is good and what is evil. Well, that is going to be all I got for you this time. Now it is your turn to take to the comments below and weigh in on this one. Is morality the foundation of Star Wars? Do we always need a little glimmer of hope no matter what the story might be, even if it is a more dark side story about the Sith? Or you can always ask a question for a future lightning response video, just to start your comment off with "Hey Thor" and ask away. But whatever you choose to do, leave those comments below. Let's talk some Star Wars, and until next time, thanks for watching.